You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall and the Daily Telegraph's chief political correspondent, Chris Hope. So let's see what's on some of those front pages now. And as you might imagine, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan is the lead for many. The fall of Kabul, that's the headline in the Metro, which pictures helicopters taking staff from the US Embassy in Kabul away to safety as the Taliban arrives in the city. The Telegraph shows the evacuation from the ground with the headline, "The West flees as Kabul falls to Taliban." This is the front of the Sun, escape from Kabul. The Financial Times, Taliban on brink of taking over Afghanistan as president flees. The Socialist Morning Star, under the headline Kabul falls, says Britain and the US are being blamed by anti-war campaigners for a failed military intervention that should never have started in the first place. One View from abroad, the leading German daily, Frankfurter Allgemeine, Zudbin says the Taliban is ready for the transition of power in Kabul, with the Afghan president having fled and the German Air Force about to leave too. While the Star looks elsewhere and leads with an impending heat wave on its way to the UK from Spain. Well, I'm joined tonight by Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall and the Daily Telegraph's chief political correspondent, Chris Hope. Welcome to you both. Good evening. Let's start with the Daily Telegraph, first of all, and their headline, "The West flees as Kabul falls to Taliban." Chris, take us into this write-up.
Well, as we'll see through this paper preview for tomorrow's papers, there really is a set of papers here which will make sobering reading in Whitehall. The West flees as Kabul falls to the Taliban. The Telegraph splash tomorrow morning. It talks about scenes reminiscent of the evacuation of Saigon at the end of the Vietnam War, with the skies over Kabul full of US helicopters ferrying staff from the US Embassy. It reports here the US ambassador has left Kabul, clutching the US flag. The French ambassador also left. The UK ambassador, Sir Laurie Bristow, is still there. He wants to see the remaining diplomats evacuated safely. We'll come on to why this is happening, but it is such a rush. And this to me, in a week when Parliament is recalled on Wednesday, this shows the beginning of the return to normal politics. This kind of politics is a politics which Boris Johnson will be really tested on as Prime Minister after this kind of 18 months of a deep freeze while we've dealt with the dreadful virus.
Yes, and the article saying that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has accepted there would be a change in the Afghan government, but has called on allies not to recognise the Taliban's reign. Does that surprise you, Tim?
No, they can't do that yet, because that's a carrot they're going to have to hold out after this has played out. I mean, the Chinese may be the first to recognise Taliban as, I don't know about the legitimate government, but the government. And I think that the many of the other countries, especially the democracies, they just need that as a carrot to try to get them to have some form of liberalism is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, treating the population decently as they try to avoid it falling back into another civil war. Chris is right that the headlines are devastating, I think. Not the actual headlines criticising Boris Johnson, just the overall tone and the word failure that you're seeing in the media over and over again. I particularly like the Metro. And this is going to happen Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday ahead of Parliament. I like the Metro front page because Chris mentioned the echo of Saigon, and both the Metro and the Morning Star have that photograph. And that for me, is going to be one of the defining images over the next few days.
And Chris, let's move on to the Sun. Their front page, escape from Kabul. Speaking to people tonight, the fear is that the people in Afghanistan do feel abandoned and that international troops are there to retrieve their own people, but those without international passports are left to cope with the Taliban.
Yeah. It's moved so quickly. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was reporting to the Telegraph how there's a big push to bring back interpreters. This is our Afghan interpreters who helped Allied troops in Afghanistan, and now it's got much wider. I mean, the pace of this, I think, has caught everyone a bit by surprise, and that's why we had the Cobra meeting today. What this means for the UK, I don't know. I was looking back at tweets by the ambassador who will be leaving the country shortly, Salori Briscoe. He said in a tweet back in just June, as recently as June, he said the UK's commitment to Afghanistan remains as strong as ever. Well, that is completely at odds with the headlines you're seeing today. And I wonder what the long-term damage to the UK might be in terms of the way we're fleeing so quickly. Ben Wallace wrote in the Sunday Telegraph today, the Defence Secretary, he said that we just can't go it alone. The reality is we cannot be on our own in Afghanistan. We follow where the US goes. And I wonder whether that's what we'll see throughout this week, looking into Wednesday, as Tim said, when Parliament's recalled. Will this lead to a reappraisal of how much we are in the pocket of America in terms of overseas military adventures like this one?
And Tim, what sort of long-term damage do you see being done as a result of initially the withdrawal of the American troops and Britain also?
It is generational damage. I mean, you can argue about the rights and wrongs of going there in the first place, the rights and wrongs about getting out. You can't argue about how the manner of getting out. That is just an abject failure. But whatever you think about it, it's a generational failure. And I don't like the term the West. I think it's a 20th century term. I prefer industrialized democracies. But this is a Western issue, and the West has abjectly failed, been seen to fail. Why should any country trust a Western country to stick with it? The operation was called Enduring Freedom. That's not much of an enduring freedom period. So I do think it's generational, and I do think that the ramifications are going to be with us for a long time. Now, public opinion, though, that's another matter. I think a lot of people in this country just simply have had enough of foreign adventures, even if it's going to lead to certain things down the line.
We've spoken about the Metro front page, but in their letters page, they're talking about the rush to quit and what position that has left the Afghan people in, Tim. Sorry, Chris, I mean. Yeah, I
mean, that's one of the reasons I brought that up. I mean, these letters, though, are saying it's a rotten rush and the Afghans have been betrayed. And I think there will be an awful lot of people who do think that. But, you know, the media doesn't always portray public opinion, because the American media are going down the same line. And I personally feel this is a betrayal and a failure. But American public opinion, after a few months, might just think, well, I'm glad we're shot of that. Now, I personally think that this is going to come back and bite us down the years with heroin and refugees. But it's a global problem. And very briefly, the Defence Secretary might say, and this is something that the Frankfurter Allgemeine is bringing up, the Defence Secretary might say, well, if the Americans go, we have to go. It's not strictly true. There's 27 other NATO countries. And can they really not pony up 2,500 troops to fill the gap that the Americans did? They all said, the Americans are going, we're off.
Chris, what's your view on that and public opinion?
Well, I think Tim's right in the short term, but I think, you know, as Tim said, longer term there could be a real problem here with refugees. We know what happened pre 9/11 with Afghanistan and the rest. I wonder how much. I mean, Joe Biden might really have a problem here. I mean, obviously this decision was made by Donald Trump. It was reaffirmed by Joe Biden when he became U.S. president. I mean, imagine if this was a Trump decision and Trump was in charge now, and the grief he'd be getting. People say that Joe Biden was different to Trump, but in many ways, you could argue by setting an artificial date of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 for this to happen, and then to drive it forward. I mean, he's almost looking towards the midterms next year, getting this done, dealing with this now. And I wonder how this might come back to haunt him.
Yes, to mark his presidency. Chris and Tim, for the moment, thank you. Coming up, meat eaters, eat your heart out. The vegan menu is on the rise. Stay with us. You are watching the press preview with us tonight. Foreign Affairs writer Tim Marshall and the Daily Telegraph's chief political correspondent Chris Hope. Welcome back to both of you. Let's have a look at the Telegraph, and this is following on from the Plymouth shootings, and it now seems that gun owners are going to face scrutiny on social media before being granted licences. Chris?
Yes, I mean, this, of course, is, the horse has bolted on this dreadful tragedy, the Home Office is now looking at the kind of social media comments from all 720,000 people who have gun licenses, asking forces to look into it. It's about time, given the kind of bile which this man, Jake Davison, was pumping out online. It's extraordinary that he was given back his gun license, despite all the threats he was making. So I think it's about time, but it should have been done before. And it's so sad that lives have been lost. Yes,
and Tim, it does seem incredibly easy to get a gun licence. You wonder how a 22-year-old got a gun licence in the first place, had it revoked and then returned.
Well, in theory, it isn't, but in practice, it seems to be. And so, yeah, I mean, I just agree with Chris. I agree with Chris that, it's a terrible wake-up call, but clearly they have got to look very closely at the stipulations to be given a licence.
Yes, let's turn a corner now, and just time for this final story in the Telegraph, and this is the unstoppable rise of the vegan menu. Does that upset or please either of you, Chris?
No. Well, it doesn't surprise me as a father of teenagers. I mean, a lot of young people are vegans nowadays. I mean, I think perhaps me and Tim might enjoy taking to a steak and a glass of claret of an evening. But I think it's right, that people are worried about, particularly beef. I think beef is a big problem for young people nowadays. I think it's a bit cruel the way cows are brought up and milk is produced and the rest of it. And I think this, I think it's interesting. I think also a lot of the vegan menu tastes like meat. Tim?
We've come a long way since the nut cutlet, when only the people that went into vegetarian restaurants, they had beards and sandals. And this is my only opportunity to say again, as a foreign affairs journalist, that I did not want to do this story, but the one from the Frankfurter. There's a joke in there.
Ah, yes. We'll search for it, Tim. Thank you very much.
I would say Tim's got a beard.
Thank you both. We shall see you again.